It appears that we're live. We'll do the little screen share thing, and that was fun. Yeah. It appears that we're live, and it's working, so we know that. So that was fun. Maybe. Get rid of this little thing, and one of these is my camera. Let's see, maybe this one. Nope, maybe this one. What's going on here? That doesn't make sense. Camera. That's the thing for the camera. It's not the actual camera. How could the camera go? It was just here. Oh, it's down here. Duh. We don't need to do quantum field crap. Where the hell was I exactly? Let's see. No, we don't want Sean Carroll. Fucking idiot. Descriptions. It should be here. The description of mass. This switched videos on me. Oh.
So, to me, the question.
All right. So I did this thing on Saturday morning. The video conference thing. And it gets kind of funny. So about 41 minutes. Well, there's a couple of arguments earlier, but it gets once after the 40-minute mark is where it starts to get kind of contentious. And then the rest of the conversation, David D. Hilster joins in, and it's really quite funny. This whatever this is. But yeah, all the dissident science, it just seems like they're willing to be quite tinfoil hatty. I mean, they just make these bold assertions just like regular physics, and they have very little tiny shreds of evidence for what they argue, and I don't like it. So anyway, it was kind of funny. So link below to that. Maybe I'll talk about some of those subjects. See if I have anything on my piece of paper here that I haven't covered. That I didn't cover in the last video, which I think, I covered a lot of crap in the last video. Crap of interest or whatever. Maybe it's better over here. I probably should put a draft physics thing in here somewhere. And such. So where's the stupid pop-out chat? One of these Adobe windows. It must be all the way back here. Nope, that's not it. Oh, that's the stupid hide thing. Where the hell is it? Should be here. Can't be that. No. Can't be that. And it's not that. So it must be somehow destroyed or made impervious to my finding of it. Yeah, that's kind of interesting. All right, well, we'll just pop it out again, I guess. Or something like that. Sorry, not doing calls right now. I'll restore the chat and then I'll pop it out again, maybe. See how that works out. Yeah, there it is. Okay, nobody here. All right, so all of that effort for no reward. No one's got anything to say. So it is kind of disappointing how, this physics room. I mean, I did mention on the In Mendham channel, and but it only had 10 views in 24 hours. So it's just pretty dismal. Now it's still only got 19, so I haven't improved things much. Friends lists. What does that have to do with anything? What's the point of a name drop? You dropped a name. I mean, you know, there's no requirement that you only type 2 words. I mean, this isn't Twitter. I mean, yes, they limit you to a couple of hundred characters, but, you know, come on. 2 words. I mean, just a guy's name. There. We've done all the work we need to do. You really think that's how the world works? Pope John Paul. There. I've said all that needs to be said. Tinkerbell. There, it's only 1 word. There. I've said all that needs to be said. I've completed the, you know, story of the meaning of life on Earth. Oh, who the fuck cares? I just, you know, this is you're just illustrating the point. I mean, this is futile. Conversation with human beings is a waste of time. They can't do anything serious. They can't do anything substantive. I mean, all they can do is comment, oh, your hair is funny. Whatever. Why anybody would even know who the composer of that ringtone is you know, I mean, it's an okay little piece of music, but it is kind of frivolous and silly. You know, it's not exactly Bach or something. But whatever. So more 1 words crap. I don't even know what this is. Libestrum. Libestrum. I don't know what that means. Fuck. All right. Maybe this room was a completely stupid and retarded idea. Because there's just nobody but retards on this planet. German. Oh, isn't that great? It's Lieber something then. Oh. I'm supposed to speak German now. You had some expectation that I speak German like more than Heil. You know, Heil. Highly. Highly there. I know that. That's all I know. Have you tried to do the specific gravity test? Well, again, why would I do the specific gravity test? I don't even understand. Why do you think this is important to me? First off, I don't know if I have any pure gold anywhere. You know, and if I did, why would I care? Again, we already pointed out how somebody could fake it just by putting lead in, because lead is heavier. So you can put lead in and then put aluminum in, and therefore the gold can be doped. You can dope it quite easily, because there's elements that are lighter and there's elements that are heavier that are a lot cheaper, and you can mix them in. Test metals using gravity. So again, what's the point? Gravity has nothing to do with mass. You don't understand that? You can't test gravity. You know, let's see how to put this. Atomically. You know, it's the feather lead ball thing. They fall at the same rate. Now, you can weigh things, all right, and do volume. Now, that's a different, what is that exactly? Well, yeah, then you're measuring the weight of the material. So gravity and weight aren't the same thing. How much force is exerted by gravity is proportional. Let's put it this way. How much force is proportional to how much mass there is. So it affects the light thing less, and it affects the heavy thing more, in the sense that they're moving the same velocity. And obviously you need less force to move light things, and you need more force to move heavy things. So I guess it is true that it is testing gravity. But again, we already discussed this. This is what, first off, it's completely uninteresting as a subject. But what does this have to do with my unification theory and conventional physics? It has nothing to do with that. What possible meaning could this have on this channel? I don't understand your point. You're saying they can't dope gold. I'm saying sure they can. No problem. The buoyancy is going to be the same if I put the equal amount of a light metal, say something that's twice as light, and some, not twice, but let's say two electrons lighter and something 2 electrons heavier. If I mix those two things together and put them in the gold, it'll weigh as much as gold. So what the fuck are you talking about? So you've typed 4-word sentence, 2-word sentence, 1-word sentence, and now 5-word sentence. Empty space is not empty. I mean, what the fuck? The space is empty. I mean, you making assertions. I'm going to declare space isn't empty. There, I've declared it. Don't you believe me? I'm Mr. Masterpool. Don't you automatically say yes to everything I say because I've proven everything over and over again? No, I don't, douche. What the hell is this shit? Empty space is not empty. Well, except for the empty space between the empty space. Oh, of course, that's empty. I mean, whatever. What do you believe it's made out of? Jello pudding, mayonnaise, fluff, Fluffernutter fame, marshmallow fluff. What do you think the empty space is? Sticky glue, nicotine. What? Lawrence Krauss. Oh, I just love Lawrence Krauss. I have so much respect for Lawrence Krauss. As a lecture about it. Who fucking cares? Lawrence Krauss is a douche, an ignorant, stupid douche. He's a mega nerd. What great contribution to science has he made? What? There's a lecture about it. Oh, you mean a speech? It's not really a lecture. What papers has he published? How to use fame to get chicks. To rape them almost. To suggest to be overly suggestive beyond reasonable politeness. I'm just saying, it's just amazing bullshit. There's absolutely no evidence of the ether. None. Zero. He made a pass to the Romanian girl. It wasn't really a pass. I mean, he, fucking stroked his hand up her thigh. I mean, it's not exactly a pass. It's something else. When you're touching a woman, it's more than passing. That's an intend to tackle kind of thing. And yes, her name is Christina Radomansky or something. So, but this is all you do get. I mean, everybody's these ether nuts. That's what's mostly in the tin hat room, except for David D. Hilster, who's a small earth creationist, believer, and he has this idea that somehow he's got a particle theory when it's really just a infinity and beyond theory. In which he claims charge doesn't exist. Just a concept. Yeah, a concept revealed in the evidence over and over and over again. Yeah, it's just a concept. Yeah, so let's see how many viewers we got. Let's just see how dismal this whole thing is. Not that I was expecting more. I shouldn't have expected anything. I was just, I don't know what I was doing. I thought the last video I made was pretty good, just going through the whole light thing and explaining photons. You're saying this is just so simple. How could these idiots not get it? I mean, it's just so simple. 6 viewers. Well, it's pitiful, especially with half-hour notice. Eesh, Sundays are not a good day, I guess, for physics talk. All right, so then I just have to do speech making, I guess. I guess there ain't going to be anything better. Well, maybe I'll play some of this funny video. And because it is funny. Let's see, let's go back a little, I think. Let's see. Which is the most fundamental forces are invalid? So this guy, whatever his name is, Bill. So he's presenting this theory, and he says that the books of, Henri Poincaré have been censored from all the libraries, and even the libraries that have the book, it's in a safe, and they can't let anybody read it because it's a sacrilege. It's the evil book, full of the evil words. And he's basically saying the whole country, it's a national policy imposed by the government that libraries can't allow this book to be read. Which is just absolute horseshit. And I call him on that absolute horseshit. Insane claim he's making. But anyway, and then the rest of his theory is basically taking Poincaré's words and perverting them preposterously. So Poincaré basically theorized that if you have 2 different systems and there's something in there that's the same, that they're not really 2 different, they're not fundamentally 2 different systems. They're just expressions of that sameness. The sameness wouldn't be a coincidence. So let's say the speed of light, if more than one thing has the speed of light, then it really can't be that the things are different things. They have to be the same thing, just different expressions of it. At least that's one way of interpreting what he said. A more fair interpretation would be, let me just think of how to state it, that so if you have equations that end up with the speed of light in them, and they're one's for magnetism and one's for gravity and one's for the nuclear force, that somehow by some logic, there's something wrong. And that's really not what Poincaré is saying. He's not saying something's wrong. There's just something wrong with you thinking these are different things, because they have this thing in common, which means that's their tree. That's their evolutionary root. Yeah, that's probably a fair way to interpret what he's saying. And so this guy perverts it into Poincaré says relativity can't be right and quantum mechanics can't be right because they share something in common, that kind of argument. That all of these theories have to be wrong because they can't have something in common if they're different theories. And clearly Einstein was all about trying to find this common thread, this thing that unifies them. And for good reason, I think. He probably saw the speed of the force as being something they all have in common, and therefore there must be a way to unify them. It seemed like a rational pursuit. Unfortunately, failed dismally, and I succeeded fantastically. But anyway, so see where we are.
Results should be coming out like that.
Well, if we found the force of gravity speed first, and we called it the speed of gravity. So if C was called the speed of gravity, or was called the speed of magnetism, then would you be arguing that the foundational thing should be magnodynamics or magnodynamics or gravidynamics? So I'm making the salient point that we discovered the speed of light first, and then we decided, Maxwell, around the same time as Poincaré, that the speed of this other force is also the speed of light. Now, if we would have found the other force first, the speed of magnetism, we would have maybe called it something entirely different, right? We wouldn't have called it the speed of light. we would have called it the speed of force, because we would realize that, oh yeah, light does it and
Could
magnetism
be a
does it.
new post.
Well, I guess I'm jumping
So-
ahead in the sense that obviously they did find them in order, and they didn't decide to change the statement. So even when Maxwell found out that the speed of magnetism is the same as light, they didn't do the obvious thing, which is say, wait a minute, it's not the speed of light, it's the speed of magnetism. Or say more rationally, it's the speed of force. And then especially when gravity came along a few years later, they have them all tied together now, all moving c. And it seems like, yeah, it's obvious. You don't call it the speed of light anymore. You call it the speed of force, because all the forces are moving at that speed. And so I'm just sort of making this point that's sort of arbitrary. This guy's saying the only science that's right is electrodynamics, which has to do with the speed of light, because somehow that's the first one we discovered, and therefore the first one must be the fundamental one, when there's absolutely no reason to do that logically. You know, it was arbitrary which one you discovered first. Erroneous.
I'm just saying that you're saying that it's all electrodynamics. I'm saying no, the fundamental force is one of these things that moves the speed of light. Okay, one of them you might argue is the most fundamental or the most rudimentary, but you're just arbitrarily picking electrodynamics because it's associated with light, and they associated light with electricity. So that's all. That's the reason why you're choosing it, is because we decided what c was based on the speed of light. We discovered that speed first, but all the other speeds are real detected speeds, and they are in fact the same.
Well, what I did is I discovered this a number of years ago, and I have replaced all those theories that you saw with a theory that's simpler and explains more data.
Right. So he doesn't answer the point I made at all. That's not what Poincare is saying. That clearly, you have to explain why you are going to assert that electrodynamics is the fundamental force when you haven't done that in this presentation. And so now his claim is, oh yeah, well, I have a theory and blah 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 blah. And so yeah, we all have theories, is what I point out. Well, anyway, you can hear me say it.
Yeah, I have my own theory too. But your argument, your presentation is asserting making extraordinary claims, and you're not providing extraordinary or even ordinary evidence, in my opinion. And frankly, that's really breaking the rules.
But wait a minute. If I explained all of the spectral...
So this guy named, I don't know, Henry, I think it is, or something, Richter. The first time I was in this room, he's this arrogant fuck. And he always interrupts and tells you when you're done. He says, he'll say something like, in the first room, I remember he said, I don't like this subject. Could we move on? I mean, who does that? People are in the middle of a conversation. He says, I don't like it. Let's move on. I mean, what the hell? Who does that?
Data for an atom from electrodynamics using a finite size soliton.
Right. So fine. That's really good that you have a soliton, and then he compares it to an electron, which makes no sense at all, since electrons aren't a force. So what the hell? We don't need to replace the matter bits. They're the big things. They're the easy things to figure out. The force bits are the tough part. But anyway.
Called an electron.
Right. Called an electron. So he thinks the electron is the elemental particle, when clearly it can't be, because it's a matter bit, and it's not moving the speed of light natively. It has to be pushed by a voltage, which has to be something called a force that's pushing it. I mean, it's wrong just in like obvious ways.
And I'm able to explain not only the data that the current theory of the atom explained, but I'm able to explain an extreme ultraviolet, which is another 50%.
All right, so he's saying there's 50% of the little bars you get for each element. It creates these little bars in the electromagnetic spectrum. And he's contending that 50% of these little bars, which are, depending on how big they are, intensity of light, is in the ultraviolet, or maybe even X-rays. And clearly we're not admitting very many of those. Now, the fact that there might be specific locations where we do admit those in the spectrum at specific frequencies, that it's possible to produce those, yes, but the quantity would be very low. So again, this is sort of deceptive. He's implying that half the energy is in the form of ultraviolet, when we know that's not true. And then he says something like, we can't detect it on Earth. Of course we can. We can detect X-rays on Earth. Now, they don't normally go through the atmosphere, but we're not talking about, we don't need to look at a star to see hydrogen. We can look at hydrogen right here on Earth. So we can look at the elements in the universe right here. We don't need to look through the atmosphere. And obviously the Hubble telescope can do it, and other telescopes can do it. But anyway, I mean, the elements create a spectrum, not just galactic elements.
Of the total spectral lines of atoms, and no current theory of the atom that I know of can explain that.
So this is another Ken Wheeler kind of off-the-cuff bullshit, where he says no theory can explain it, or no model, and where's his evidence of no, they're not providing an experiment, explanation? I'm sure I could ask, if 60 symbol guys were available for me to ask, I'm sure they would have an explanation that, yeah, sure, everything admits a few very narrow frequency photons as part of the energy profile, because some of the interior electrons are perturbated, they're disturbed, and so you do create a few X-rays. You're admitting some right now, not very many, but you are admitting some at specific frequencies. I'm sure they'd explain it. I'm sure it's not something they can't explain. So another one of these claims, this is what just means it's pseudoscience. If you can't correctly paraphrase your the competing person's argument, and you have to constantly distort it and constantly claim they haven't answered a question, or they have no reply, or they've said nothing when they've said plenty, that's just proving you're not doing a fair game. And then this Richter guy laughs at that idea of fair arguments. These are not fair arguments. These should be red flagged. They should be flagged. You can't do that. Okay, make your argument that you can prove. Make the argument for which you have evidence. Don't make claims you can't substantiate. You're wasting our time when you do that.
And yeah, well, I'm just saying, I have a current theory of the atom that explains all of this stuff. So again, the argument is how do we tell stories
that NASA,
how do we distinguish between?
So he's saying explains the hundreds of spectral lines that NASA has found, and blah blah blah. Yeah, I mean, explaining a spectral line is not that complicated. It just has to do with the pressure the electron's under. Whatever the pressure of the electron will dictate what the electron produces when you disturb it, what voltage escapes. And essentially the photon is an expression of the voltage of the electron. And so yes, and we understand that the electrons are in specific tension and in specific orbits on the atom, and clearly the pressure on the interior electrons would be greater than the pressure on the exterior electrons, and they would be quite capable, if you could plow something through the exterior electrons and actually hit one of the electrons in the interior orbits, that you would be able to create a high energy photon. That's not high energy, I'm just using their jargon, but a high frequency photon would be easily created on the interior, if you can bother the interior of an atom. And this guy's talking like nobody can explain that. I think somebody can, and I think more than just me can.
How do we
explain any of the hundreds of lines that NASA has found for the spectrum of hydrogen? I don't think you have.
I don't think you've studied as much as I have the stuff I've studied. I've studied in detail interferometers and the two-slit experiment and other phenomenon that quantum mechanics is based on, and I found better answers to those questions through my own investigation. So I'm not going to sit there and have some competition.
Yeah, I'm talking about the theory of the atom.
That's what you want.
Yeah, so again, this idea that people think they have this sacred knowledge. So he's saying, he's not asking, answer the question. He's just saying, you can't answer it. He's just assuming there's no other possible answer besides his answer. Where I've actually posted my question and say, go ahead, give me the alternative explanation. Consistent with conventional physics, of course.
I'm just trying to make an argument about the idea when you make claims, we're all obligated to persuade each other with evidence. We can't persuade each other with name dropping or citations to magical experiments that are somehow empirical when they're not. So I'm just saying that we're all under the same obligation to prove a case, and we're not allowed to basically prove it by saying everybody says I'm right or something like that. We have to prove it through a sequence of logic, and I'm just saying there's sequences in your logic where you're citing Poincare saying it's not possible that these things could all have the same speed when that wasn't what he was saying.
No, I didn't say that. I said that
That's
constant in their empirical laws.
So that was the Hicks guy, Ricker, saying that's your opinion. Yeah, that's right. I just expressed my opinion about what I think our obligation is, which is to prove what we're arguing, to provide evidence and reasoning that would compel somebody to say, yes, that makes sense. That's the obligation. The obligation isn't tell lies and propagandize and exaggerate and see if you can fool people. That's, not the game you're supposed to be playing. And I shouldn't even have to explain that. This is bizarre because this I can't find the pop-up window. It should be right there. See, it's right there. But I can't find it on the taskbar. Well, here, okay, it's under YouTube, of course. So Danish physicist deleted his message. Well, so we didn't miss anything, did we? No, of course we didn't. All right, so I can pop it up here. All right, it seems so obvious that, hey, Gary, it's just the window's right there, you dumb piece of fucking shit. All right. So continuing, it gets funny here.
It indicates their empirical law has to be electrodynamic in nature.
So again, he's saying the empirical law. So somehow the foundation of the universe has to be electromagnetic because we discovered C first in that realm, and therefore all the other C's are invalid. Those theories can't possibly be right. And Poincare was not saying that. And this is what's just so rude about what people do. I mean, they play with dead people and they make them say things they didn't damn say, and they feel fine about that. They put words in Tesla's mouth, they put words in Einstein's mouth. They just, it's rude. It's rude to play with dead people.
Pointed out, I think that's an arbitrary choice made by the circumstance of what speed we discovered first. So you're just saying the first speed discovered is the first cause, and everything has to be molded onto that first foundational cause. And I'm saying I think I could make the same argument that, no, I can make an argument that gravity is the more rudimentary expression of the force, and make a very good argument, in my opinion, and that photons are a more complex and much smaller energy quanta.
So I'm just pointing out that this is the argument. Lots of arguments could be made about why gravity is fundamental or why the nuclear force is fundamental. I mean, you could argue it's more fundamental because it's inside the atom and all that kind of stuff. I mean, gravity's inside the atom too. But anyway, I'm just saying you can make these arguments. And this guy is saying, I know this is the truth because we discovered this first. And that's all he's saying. He doesn't have any evidence of why this is the more fundamental force, except to say, I'm going to discount every theory and every model created after the model that first had C in it. So the equation that got C in it first is the only valid equation, and the rest of the equations are now null and void. And that's really what he's saying, when, you know, all of the equations are valid. And what we should understand from the connection between this speed is that all of these forces are related. That should be the rational conclusion.
Expression of that force, and a much narrower expression of that force. So I don't think it's the fundamental force at all, just by that logic alone.
So you're saying gravity, your preference is that gravity is more the fundamental force?
Now, see, that's the Franklin, who? Franklin who? I'm not, I might be, it's a 2-letter name. Anyway, this guy, this Franklin guy, I like. All right, I don't, you know, he's an ether guy. He's a lot of problems, but he's got a real even temperament, and he actually listens because he asks relevant questions. They're amazingly relevant. I mean, he actually paid attention to what I was saying, and he got, oh, so you're arguing that you can maybe put these forces on a hierarchy and explain how one is more fundamental, and yeah, he's actually asking a relevant question. I mean, bravo, good work. I mean, you have to applaud that. All right, here we go. The emission spectra led to the Bohr model of the atom. Well, I don't know which led to which, is who knows. So this guy is just lying when he says nobody has an explanation. Well, that's all I'm saying, is clearly he makes a lot of assertions, and this assertion that physics can't explain spectral lines in the ultraviolet is bullshit. The argument that we need NASA to see spectral lines in the ultraviolet is bullshit. That's just looking at galaxies, you know, and stars. Yeah, you know, we can look at an atom and look at its spectral lines right here on Earth. We do not have to put it in space to see the radiation that comes off of it. So his whole premise is a perversion and a distortion.
I'd rather not say that they're fundamental in the sense that it isn't segregated by frequency. That is, it isn't.
So let's understand, I wasn't going to go into this detail, right? I mean, I didn't have any intention. I said, well, I don't really want to do this, which force is more fundamental thing. It's not a subject, okay? And so I was just trying to answer his question, though. And because I answered his question, you can see what this stupid Richter guy does.
Been manipulated. So gravity would be the unmanipulated force. Photons would be manipulated in the sense they have the frequency. And magnetism would be manipulated in that it's segregated based on polarization, electron force versus proton force.
I mean, this is just such a basic argument that I think is just unassailable. It just can't be attacked in any rational way. That clearly this is the model. I mean, this is the way it works. And I mean, it fits so well. Just understand these are the same force. They're all moving the same speed, and they only have this force is being manipulated by atoms. And when it manipulates it one way, it creates a photon. When it manipulates it another way, it creates magnetism. I mean, even if you don't think that's good enough evidence, I'm just saying as a reasoned argument, you have to concede that's pretty bulletproof. That's really hard to argue with because it fits so well.
Positive charge versus negative charge. So yes, gravity is the most basic form. The other forms are real forms. They're not less real, but they're just more complexly modified forms of the same force.
So the guy, he's trying to interrupt me again, the Richter guy. That's all he does is shut other people up. You know, so let's play this asshole. I mean, he's just a fucking asshole. I mean, nothing personal, but he's so fucking insanely arrogant, and he'll sit there and point his finger, call somebody else arrogant. It's just amazing.
This is not a forum for you to expound your theory.
So he says, this is not a forum for you to expound your theory. That's all people do in this room. Nothing else takes place in this room except people arguing their theory from their point of view. That's all that ever takes place here. I've watched 6 or 7 of these things. Nothing else takes place in these rooms. And it's just hilarious. It's not a forum for you to argue. Yeah, it is, because that's all you people do. Fucking amazing.
Well, I didn't know that's what it wasn't a forum for. Sorry.
Well, I mean, everyone is free to express
I
their.
disagree with that.
So everybody's free. So at least the Franklin guys chiming in saying, well, look, all you assholes do the same thing. So why the hell are the rules different for this guy than for you assholes who are always arguing your crap? I mean, again, the Franklin guy is fair cop.
Yeah, we're talking about Bill's paper. I have some comments.
Right. I was talking about Bill's paper and how he was making this kind of preposterous assertion that I have and Poincaré, you know, and so he's claiming Poincaré's on his side, which I think is just stealing a dead guy's face, you know, and wearing it. And this assertion that somehow Poincaré has a secret proof that no one will allow anybody to see that proves that Maxwell's equations are rubbish and that Einstein's equations are rubbish and that any equation except for, you know, this little narrow electrodynamic equations that he accepts, all the rest of the science is rubbish.
I'd like to make about Bill's presentation. So I think we should do that.
Yeah, right. And so that's exactly what I did, right? I mean, I criticized the focus of his paper, which was me and Poincaré have a proof that quantum mechanics can't be right and Einstein can't be right because they're using these other equations. The nuclear forces are trying to use the same equations, and Einstein's trying to use the same equation with the same speed in it, and they're not allowed to use that speed, you know, because that's the sacred speed of electrodynamics. He's basically saying that C squared is owned by electrodynamics and nothing else can use it. Yeah, it's a really bold assertion. That, again, that Poincaré said that, and that this guy can prove that. That there's any book in the world that can provide a proof demonstrating that these other forces can't move the same speed as the speed of magnetism or light. Now, the speed of light, to be more precise. They're not doing the electrodynamics in the magnet sense. They're, you know, the Maxwellian sense. They're doing electrodynamics in the speed of light sense.
I did that, frankly.
All right, well, you're done now then.
Oh, thank you for telling me. Go ahead, Mr. Tell me what I've done or what I haven't done person.
You're arrogant.
He calls me arrogant. He just says, well, now you're done then. This asshole gets to tell other people when they're done, all right? Interrupts them, tells them they're done, and then he calls somebody else arrogant. I mean, amazing arrogance. I mean, how clueless can this flathead be?
You are incredible.
Okay, just a minute. Let's be respectful here, okay?
Yeah, let's be respectful. Again, you know, no respect. This guy is chronically disrespectful. I mean, he chronically does this. You know.
Just let other people talk.
No, let you talk is all you're saying. I'm interested in certain subjects. Don't talk about what I'm not interested in. And, you know, you shut up and let me talk. I mean, you know, he's just amazing.
Questions.
Okay, go ahead, Harry. Go ahead. Your turn.
I did ask the moderator to announce.
So I'm just pointing out that I asked Franklin, look, choose one of us, because after the guy was done, I sort of chuckled and said, who gets to go first? Because this guy is so full of shit that I'm sure other people are going to say something like, you're full of shit. And so I asked him, and then I said politely, I could do it in 2 minutes. So I was asking for my 2 minutes, and then he gave me the 2 minutes. What did I do wrong? I didn't do anything wrong. And then Franklin asked me a question, and I answered it. That's all I fucking did. You know, and this asshole is acting as if I was trying to control, and I'm taking over, and I'm doing... No, none of that happened.
Which one of us would be able to respond. I was trying to be respectful of everybody's right to. You could have been chosen as the first person to respond. I'm not trying to overwhelm or dominate anybody here. So yes, please go ahead. But you're saying that you've just interrupted.
So they censor me, right? They cut my mic off. And, I think David did that. D. Hilster, because he did some kind of red flaggy thing later. Because this pop-up kept popping up that I'm flagged for some reason. Well, anyway, you can hear it later. It does get kind of entertaining. You know, but yeah, so I was just trying to point out that, look, no fouls here. I asked a relevant question. I was asked for a couple of questions and I answered them. And then you interrupted and said, shut up. That's what took place. Nothing else happened here except you decided you don't want to hear what I have to say. I have to hear what you have to say, but you don't want to hear what I have to say. And that's all you did. Cunt. So, moment of silence, because
I think the issue here is your question is, how can we falsify a scientific theory? And
so this is one of the, I just hate this stupid term, falsify. It's just so stupid. I mean, obviously, if you can find a contradiction in the theory or a paradox the theory creates, yes, then you're winning in the sense that you can defeat it now. If I have a theory of a murder, and my theory is the guy was there at 7 o'clock and there's evidence that he was someplace else at 7 o'clock, then obviously my theory has a problem. I'm going to have to account for that somehow. And so, yes, that's very valuable in an argument. But this idea that you don't have to prove anything and you have to wait for somebody to find out where your contradictions are. So I don't have to prove that he was there. I don't have to prove that he did. I don't have to show evidence, that fingerprints. I don't have to show anything. I can just tell a story, and I have to wait for somebody else to disprove it by pointing out, well, I have the receipt from when he was at the grocery store. No, it's not about waiting for somebody else to tear it down. You still have an obligation to actually show reason to believe, you know, plausibility. And so this isn't just about debunking bullshit. It's about requiring the bullshit to have some shred of evidence and not to be entirely made out of stealing dead people's faces and wearing them, and talking absolute bullshit about how the government is controlling the literary scientific works of Henri Poincaré, which is a crock of shit.
I'm kind of confused about this existential and postmodern scientific method here that you're saying
here. So the guy has to take a while to think, I think, because it's like, what the fuck is it? What are you, existential postmodern? What are you talking about? What is it? That would confuse me too. I'd be like, what are you talking about? What specifically is the problem? Broken. So I guess we're done. It's broken. Let's see if it refreshes. Maybe the browser's froze ed.
I think the issue here is your question is, how can we falsify a scientific theory? And I'm kind of confused about this existential and postmodern scientific method here that you're saying here. Okay, so to me, the question is, how do you falsify a scientific theory? Isn't that really what your question is? Then you present evidence that the modern scientific theories are false. When you
so there's no evidence that any modern scientific theory is false presented in this, except for Henri Poincaré 100 years ago said it's impossible for something to be right if, you know, if I'm wearing a white t-shirt, nobody else can wear white t-shirts because that would be a clone of me. Something like that. When he's really not saying that. He's just saying that two different things, you know, from different origins are very unlikely to have things in common. But it's not a law. It's not a rule. And you can see that, like in marsupials, for example, the pattern of predator and prey is exactly the same. And the predators end up looking very much like the predators of the mammals. And the prey ends up looking very much like the prey of the mammals. I mean, they're very similar organisms, even though they have no, even though their common ancestor was a lizard. you know, something completely different. So patterns are repeated. The South America cheetah, jaguar, you know, not entirely dissimilar from its African distant relations.
That your empirical evidence. Isn't that really what you're saying?
Well, you asked me that question?
Yeah.
Terry?
Duh.
Well, the assumption is that you left out a point here in the postmodern scientific method, okay, which I think is the issue that really has been discussed here, and that is the postmodern scientific method says you have to propose a theory that's better than the theory that we've already developed after 30 or 40 or 50 years of working on it. And so we're not going to listen to you unless you can come up with a better theory than we've had come up with after 50 years of work.
Yeah, that would be the obligation, is that it should, who cares how long it was worked on? Who cares how old it is? This is a meritocracy in the sense that, you know, even though it's, yes, they've had more time to engineer gimmicks and all that kind of stuff. If you want to knock the king down, you're usually going to have to bring a bigger game, not an equal game, not a tiny bit better game. You're going to have a much better game. So yeah, you do have an obligation to have a better game. Playing again. Cunt. Play. Oh man, what the hell is this? There it goes.
Let's just take the theory of the atom. The theory of the atom involves a nucleus and electrons. And the electron, we know from experiment, has a magnetic moment. It has a second type of magnetic moment, which we call spin.
Which he says the we stuff, you know, and again, second type of magnetic moment, again, more just gibberish. Nothing. Well, anyway, I don't want to go into it, but yeah, no, they don't have. The fact that atoms have a lack of symmetry and therefore a charge is a fact. Calling it a magnetic moment is, I think, reaching.
And it's got a mass, and it's got a size, and it's not a point. Now, if you look at the quantum theories of the...
It's not a point, he said. When, of course, it is a point. So, again, just assert something that, you know, I don't think you can prove it's not a point. It behaves like a point in 99% of the experiments. It behaves just like a point. Let's see what we got here. So we got obviously a driveler, so we'll have to just delete him. So yes, none of your shit will be read, so I'll delete it. So what about fractals? Quite irrelevant. What if ether is a fractal medium hyperspace? Yeah, well, whatever. Doesn't that all sound like baby talk? Oh, you know all the special little sci-fi words. Isn't that fucking cute? Baby talk. All of you are a bunch of kooks and pseudosciences. So you're the one using fractal medium for hyperspace, and you're calling somebody else a pseudoscience. Amazing. Who cares? Lawrence Krauss is God. Hilarious. And again, what's his contribution to science besides theater, besides pantomime science? No anti-gravity, no proof, whatever that even means. Fractoid counter space. Well, we're done. Fuck you. So, you wasted your time because I'm not even going to see your stupid comments. Yeah, that's what's going to happen. Shit for brain. You're just wasting space and time. All right. So that should clean things up. I have a question. Well, you really shouldn't make a comment saying I have a question. You should just ask the question. What is the equation? Oh, like I really could give a shit. To calculate acceleration with inertial and final velocity only. I'm sure it's some equation that takes into account that there's always an inefficiency of a force pushing an object. The force never entirely gets absorbed in entirely efficient manner. So some of the force is wasted as reflections and creating heat and other mechanisms inside the structure. So the initial velocity and the final velocity, there'll be a curve, a line. And that's what the formula is going to reveal, a line, like induction. So it'd be a line that starts off a little slow and then it accelerates at the end, where it gets more and more efficient as it gets closer and closer to the final speed. So it'd be some kind of line like that. But again, how does this have anything to do with contrasting my theory against the wacky conventional nonsense? Oh, that's right, nothing. So the Danish physicist provides the equation A equals V minus U, whatever that would be, over time. So it's a timed equation that over time a little bit of U happens and the U consumes the V. And so the V doesn't immediately equal the acceleration. It takes a little time for your velocity to absorb your acceleration. Let's see, Nobel Prize or Nobel, what the hell, he's written it two different ways. Nobel Prize or Nobel Prize, whatever. Thanks. All right, so I didn't know this room was going to be used for, let's ask some, first semester mathematical questions, because math is physics, right? We all know math is physics. Physics isn't about models and structure. No, physics is just a stupid fucking equations. Oh, shit.
The atom, they have a lot of problems. They cannot explain why it has a magnetic moment, why it has a spin.
So again, he says these things. Now, clearly they don't really, their notion of what spin is isn't even defined. Spin is a property related to charge. It's not necessarily actual spinning. So he's just playing with the words. And again, more claims that they can't provide a reasonable explanation for a circumstance when, of course, they can. Some of their explanations are quite reasonable, but just more assumption. Let's just assume they, oh yes, no, they have nothing. They have absolutely nothing. When, there are some subjects for which they have nothing. The origin of the virtual photon that transmits the force of magnetism. Yes, they have no explanation for the mechanism.
Which is the second type of magnetic moment. They cannot explain the origin of its mass. They cannot explain why it doesn't.
Why would anybody have to explain the origin of a elemental particle's substance? I mean, God did it. I mean, what intelligent theory could someone construct out of absolutely no evidence? So we have no evidence of origin, and yet he's saying they can't explain it. Well, that's because there's no evidence, and you sure as fuck aren't going to explain it either, douchebag.
Spiral into the nucleus, because in an accelerator, you have electrons going around the accelerator, and you have a positive charge in the center. The electron will always spiral into it as soon as you stop giving it energy to keep it.
Yes, well, that's because we already understand the concept. That's called magnetism. That's kind of obvious that the two charges are pushed into each other.
Spiraling in. And so the experimental data is all against the theory of the current theories of the atom that we have. But what do we do?
So all the current data is against the current theory, more just preposterous exaggeration that somehow this is doing good alternative science. Now, this is, we call this alt science, try to give it some respectability. And the community of alt science has to regulate itself. And if it doesn't, it's just going to look like a nutter school. A bunch of asswipes just making preposterous claims for which they have no evidence, no proof, and they're just insanely exaggerating the story. And somehow we're all going to win if we allow those people in our group. And we flag ourselves as, I'm one of the dissidents. If this is what the dissidents are going to do, then no, please, I can't belong to that group, because they're a bunch of lying sacks of silly shit.
How is it that we justify the theories? Because what they're predicting doesn't agree with what we observe experimentally. The assumptions they have don't.
So again, just this crap that somehow he just assumes they don't have an explanation. He doesn't show that they don't have an explanation for these aberrant experiments and aberrant results, ones that aren't consistent. And that somehow we can deny the 99% of the evidence because we have one aberrant experiment. And that somehow that proves the theory is entirely wrong. And these are just, like I said, it's just insane exaggeration. You have to do a little better than that. I mean, if you're going to make a comparison to a trial, I mean, there is evidence that against conviction, like you could have evidence that would prove you innocent, and sometimes it can be pretty weak, like your wife testimony. Your wife testifies that you were home all night. Yeah, and that's not very credible, and so that evidence doesn't mean much compared to the fingerprints and the DNA and all the other crap that you have on the other side.
Agree with what we observe experimentally. None of that data is used to falsify the theory. Why?
The bottom line is, Bill, as you're saying that basically you can't falsify a theory in existential and postmodern scientific method. It's impossible to say the theory.
So he's being sarcastically. He's essentially saying, "Oh, Bill, you're just trying to do something, but no one will let you. No one will let you falsify their theory with this hard modern evidence that you have." And clearly the evidence isn't substantial, and that's why, yes, you can't falsify a theory with weak evidence. But people keep doing that, right? It's the kind of thing when they find out the guy's DNA doesn't match, and therefore they say, therefore he must be innocent. When no, it just means that the sample wasn't good enough and you can't make a match. Doesn't mean he's innocent.
Is wrong, because they will always say we can fix it somehow.
And that's anybody's going to do that. So here we are, trying to understand the tiniest little minutia in the universe and how it functions. And this asshole is basically saying, no, we have to get it right the first try, and we can't modify anything to new evidence. And that's just showing that our theory was broken from the start if we have to modify it. Of course, we're going to have to make it more precise. Darwin's evolution was a great start, okay? I mean, it had a lot of fundamental elements, but it didn't really deal with the Gould contribution, which was, this evolution. The reason why there's not a whole bunch of fossils of the missing link is because the organisms that were doing all the evolving were little tiny herds, way separate from the big herd. And they did their evolving over thousands of years. And then when they were really, really superior organisms, that's when they encountered their herd again and they took over. They dominated. And that's how this works. I mean, all of the North American Indians genetically it can be argued that the entire population of all the American Indians were the product of 6 females that crossed the bridge. Tiny, tiny population.
Unless for some political reason they want that to happen, then they accept it. Yes.
So unless for some political reason they want to accept a radical change. Well, we haven't had any evidence of them accepting radical change since Einstein. So there really hasn't been any hope of that in the last 50 years or more, 100 years, you could argue. I mean, since the 30s, they haven't been willing to do much modifying. and clearly no radical, let's go back to an earlier foundation. And that is a problem. But again, it's just part of the obligation of the dissident is to have the better argument, the better evidence, and to make a clean argument. And as soon as you dirty it with lies and, you know, crappy character witnesses and a bunch of stuff that looks like just propaganda, you're not winning. That's how to lose the argument. That might win you some religious kooky fans, but it's not going to win you the argument.
So it seems to me there's a flaw in the scientific method right there, which is how do you establish that there's something wrong in what the modern scientific method says is so?
You do it through this process, exactly. But you have to do it in a way, again, where you don't format your argument with a bunch of rubbish. So if you make it too easy for them to just say you're full of shit, and there's a whole plethora of full of shit moments in this video, citations to absolute crap. The guy claims in here that, you know, he helped his grandson win a science prize that was worth hundreds of thousands of dollars with some of this rubbish, implying that somehow this rubbish, you know, won prizes. He talks about how he's been published all over the world, published in like this, or the CNPS will publish anything. They will literally publish anything. They really don't have any standards. They'll publish anything. It's not reviewed. It's certainly not peer reviewed, and it's not even reason reviewed. It's not even like English language reviewed. It's so bad. All right, see if anybody's had anything to say. Doesn't look like it. Boy, you people suck. But I've already pointed that out and kind of proven that case many, many times. You people suck.
How can you establish there's a mistake in there? And it doesn't look like in your diagram that there's any way to do it.
Yeah. And this is not my diagram. This is from the literature in textbooks and that sort of thing as to how the postmodern.
So again, it's this stupid theory of logic. There's no theory of logic. Logic is facts, and having a bunch of them and having them all point in one direction, you know, to one conclusion without any facts going sideways and going in some other direction. Logic is like creating a strong magnet. It's getting all the domains to line up and point one way. That's the process of making an argument. And, you know, when you're creating fake bits and sticking them in your argument, it's you know, if you're caught cheating, that's what it looks like. It looks like you're a cheater. That's all. You're easy to dismiss, you know.
An existential scientific method works. So
there's no falsification of any modern scientific method. It's just not possible.
So again, more statements. Of course, it is possible that you come up with the right question and you phrase it, and the physicists can't answer it, and they say, "Yeah, well, you got me on that. It really doesn't fit." So, I mean, like my question of the gravity lens being the wrong shape and that it can't possibly focus light, which it's supposed to be doing. I mean, it's supposed to be magnifying something that's a distant object. And the way you magnify something is to focus the light. That is, you bend the light on the edges more than you bend the light in the middle. And the gravity lens does exactly the opposite. So it seems a pretty strong argument, and so maybe they'll concede that once they think about it and say, "Oh yeah, well, you got me on that," because shit, yeah, how do you focus with that stupid lens? That lens ain't going to make far away things look close. You're right, that's stupid.
It would seem to me that they're just ignoring this. I mean, I think this diagram is perfect with.
They're ignoring this fringe character who makes these insane assertions. And they're doing it for a rational reason. I would say, look, yeah, I mean, you know, if this is how you're going to make your argument, wearing dead people clothes, you know, and and pretending that you don't have to actually make an argument. You can just cite a mystery proof that's been censored by the government. I mean, that's like making the UFO theory and just making it into a gigantic conspiracy where millions of people are hiding the aliens from us. Of course you're going to be dismissed because it's preposterous as a theory.
Good, but if you're sitting there and you're doing the analysis and it says experimental data inconsistent with the hypothesis, which is actually what Bill was saying, you know, they're supposed to revision the hypothesis.
Theory by introducing a new hypothesis or changing some parameters. You don't actually admit the theory is wrong.
I mean, there's really hard evidence. I mean,
all right. So before I say this, I mean, you know, you could argue in these circumstances, it's like the inverse square law. See, somebody could say, oh, it's the inverse square law. And as I've pointed out, it's not really a law. It's just a general rule. Because if I take two objects and they're far enough away from each other, from the perspective of every little bit, the inverse square law happens because there's a whole bunch of these angles that don't hit any atoms in the pen. And the further away you put things, the more straight line it gets, and the more that most of the stuff doesn't hit the pen. You could sort of see that the angle gets. And so when you're really close, an atom in the middle of this lighter, from its perspective, from really close, it's going to be like 99.9% of every bit of energy it produces will hit one of these atoms. And therefore, there is no inverse square law anymore. So that when you get things really close, there is no inverse square law. So yeah, it's a law, but it's only a law for things that have some distance between them. It's not a law when things are really, really close. But see, somebody can use that and say, see, the law isn't a law, and therefore the entire theory is wrong. No, there's an explanation for why the law isn't 100% always accurate as a description. There's a reason, and the reason can be explained.
Empirical, you know, right in your hands, right in your face evidence, and then there's evidence that's quite abstract. And I think that's a distinction that has to be made, that most of modern physics is based on equations and experiments that have an insane number of assumptions built into them, and any one of those assumptions, if incorrect, means the results of the experiment are completely incorrect.
So Nolan responded this perfectly good point that, you know, there's not even an argument about either we don't get to even see the proof. So they just claim we detected gravitational waves, but we really don't see the data. And we're just to accept it as we say so because our big, fancy, expensive device says so. And all the assumptions we have built into this device says so, even though we don't even have any logic for how the device could actually work. Theoretically, there's no theory presented that the device actually does what they claim it does.
It's what they've interpreted them to be. So I'm just saying, you know, you have to weigh the evidence based on its strength. I would argue that there's absolutely no evidence of gravitational lensing because you can falsify the evidence in the sense that you can present an argument that points out how it can't happen without your special dark matter or without some magical extra that you put into the reality to fix it. So I think that just points out how the evidence is weak. So you just say,
so yeah, this would be I think it would be a good framework is to point out theories that are based on strong evidence, lots of hands-on, real hard data, and theories that are based on, evidence, experiments that aren't easily proven to produce the cause and effect chain that you're claiming. There's a cause and effect chain you're claiming that's happening, like the interferometer. They claim the photons are interfering, but we don't have a real logical theory about how exactly they do that, or at what point in the experiment even they do that.
It's a weak theory versus a strong theory, but there has to be some distinction between the quality of the evidence.
So dead silence. Just dead silence, really. Okay, so here's let's see what Mr. Ricker says.
I think is based on whether or not it's done by the government and whether or not how many people have reviewed the experiment, how many people reviewed the funding request.
So again, it's this, it's not a horrible thing, but this whole idea that there's a government conspiracy and the government did this. So I did modify this to point out, no, the government isn't telling science what to think. Science is telling government what to think. And it's just an ivory tower elitism just built out of some notion that, well, they're doing math I can't possibly understand, so therefore they must know what they're talking about, when those two things aren't necessarily connected at all.
And all of the processes that go into getting the money from the government and getting all the approvals, and there's all these reviews and everything. And so the assumption is by the time you come out with a result, the result is correct.
Well, that's what I'm saying, though. It's a manufactured theory that doesn't really have any hard evidence behind it. So it's just if you were to go to trial and you were going to convict somebody of murder and send them to prison for 99 years, I don't think you'd want to do it based on the evidence for quantum mechanics or the evidence for bent space. It's really weak evidence, not really strong evidence.
In the case of bending of starlight,
so that was a pretty big nothing. So at least there's, and then, but yeah, he's going to bring up something we all know about already, blah, 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 blah. But anyway, I mean, it's kind of funny that none of these members actually watches anybody else's videos. I mean, none of these people watch David's videos. These guys don't watch each other's videos at all. It's just hilarious. I, the one who's not a member, watch more of these videos than they do.
Ed Dowdy has taken, who used to work for NASA, is retired now. He has shown that the NASA data doesn't support it. And the bending of starlight as you're going by the sun should be a certain amount depending upon the distance from the center of the sun. And what you find is when you're going through the outer edges of the sun, you do get a bending of starlight. But as you go farther out, it doesn't exist at all.
So again, he's claiming that there is bending, but there isn't. That's, it's all scatter. But regardless, his claim is that there should be bending at these certain other locations by Einstein's math, and there's not. Well, Einstein's math is clearly just rubbish anyway. So as I've pointed out, it has these two gimmicks in it that, are crap. They have no logical legitimacy. You can't logically explain why the gimmick exists. That photons aren't affected by the inverse square law. The sun somehow creates a radiation at the inverse square law of gravity, and somehow when a photon's in there, it's not the inverse square law anymore. It's 1/r. It's a much stronger force just for photons. And because photons go through gravity very fast, that they somehow get time dilated and think they were in the gravity twice as long, and therefore they got affected by twice as much gravity, even though they weren't actually in the gravity twice as long. So the actual fact that they physically weren't in the gravity twice as long doesn't matter because the photon thinks so. I mean, those are two silly catch-22 bullshitisms. They're not even catch-22. They're just fucking pieces of absolute crap.
It should be still a very measurable quantity.
No, it really shouldn't, because Einstein's math took away two factors.
Sorry. Yeah, I couldn't help myself. So I'm going to say the same thing again, which is fine, because it's a thing that needs to be said over and over again, because this is where physics is full of shit. This is where they lose their credibility. This is where Einstein's equation loses credibility.
Doesn't apply the inverse square law, as you pointed out in your thing. It's a very fundamental law of how forces behave. And it also pretends that because photons are moving the speed of light, that they're somehow in the gravity twice as long because they think they are. Those are two mathematical gimmicks that make the whole thing mathematically plausible in the first place. So the mathematics has been rigged. The Eddington experiments was rubbish. and the galactic lensing, the lens is the.
So I pointed out the Eddington experiment is garbage. The one that got Einstein's name on the headline of the New York Times saying Einstein proven right. When obviously it wasn't proven right because the evidence was junk.
The wrong shape. There's more bending with gravity. There's more bending in the middle and less bending on the outside of the lens, which means it's exactly the opposite of a focusing lens. It can't possibly focus light, so it can't possibly work anyway.
Looks like David, you had a flag up.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I don't know what these flag things is, but yeah, just for the record, there was David kept doing some flag thing that would pop up on my screen that I have to dismiss. It's a red flag, so I don't know what that. What does that mean exactly? If he wants to say something, why is it flagging me? And if he wants to say something, why doesn't he just chime in?
I had a question for Bill. You were mentioning how I know Draft Science. I know him as well. He was doubting, of course, your contention that you can't get at information, and that's, for me, that's not unbelievable at all, given that most all news even today is controlled by 6 companies.
So because we put capitalists are in control of media and they serve people the news they want to hear, that somehow that means that we should all have the expectation that librarians routinely censor the library because the government told them so. And they never let us know that, yes, the government has told us we can't allow you to see this whole list of books. Come on, please. We know that school libraries get censored, and sometimes, appropriately. But does anybody really believe librarians would just go along and they'd never say to the National Enquirer, yeah, I've been told by the government that I'll be killed if I let somebody see the secret books in the safe in the back room? Who believes that horse shit?
The question I have for you is, when was the last time you tried to get that information? And do you think that bringing that fact to the public, that you can't get that information, will help?
This is like the whole Tesla conspiracy theories, that somehow all of Tesla's great works were censored by the government and stolen by the government and blah, blah. None of that happened. Tesla did nothing for the last 30 years of his life, and he published in the sense that he gave people samples and tried to sell the idea. I can make a death ray. Just give me $1 million and I'll make a death ray. And nobody bought it because he couldn't prove that he had any death ray, and he didn't have any way to make a death ray. He just had a theory about how to waste $1 million.
Us with our cause by saying, hey folks, they don't even let us see data, let alone have different ideas. That's my question.
It's been a while since I looked at that at the University of Maryland, and it was only just about 5 or 10 years ago I did work with ACI in Brazil, and
so he has these vague notions of conspiracies. 5 years, 10 years, who knows when it was, whatever, yeah, blah blah blah. But yes, nobody would let me see the secret Poincaré information, and I know about it through, because I'm channeling him, and so I know he wrote another book that they're censoring. And so that's how I know about it, is because I am in the know. The secret book. I have the know of the secret book. All right. There needs to be more animated 3D representations of how these particles behave, including what Gary thinks. So again, if you look, this is physics. I'm not really attempting to make this publicly consumable. The public has no clue. They'll just be told who's right, and they'll say, oh, okay, he's right. They're not going to understand shit anyway. And if you need me to draw pictures of every single detail, you're just pointing out how you can't do physics then. This isn't all that complicated. And I have done a ton of pictures, but this whole, I need 3D representations and all. Now really, if that's what's needed, then you people are way too stupid for the conversation. It's physics, for fuck's sake. It's not checkers, even though it can be analogized to a much simpler than the silly physics they believe. I'm just saying it still requires you to have some understanding of the concept of force and matter and movement. But again, I don't need to draw two Volkswagens crashing into each other for you to understand what happens when two Volkswagens crash into each other. Do I need to have a 3D animation for me to say, well, you know, the fenders fly off and the compresses and the metal squeaks and some sparks and the battery fluid flies out? You can get it, right? I don't need to draw you a fucking picture, do I? Yeah, I'm just so sick of this fucking crap. It doesn't deal with the actual arguments being made. It's just more crap.
He is, I don't know if you know who he is, but he is
Very much so.
Yeah, so David actually did 2 videos interviewing the guy. So again, this Dave Hicks guy, or whatever his name is, Bill Lucas, he doesn't even listen to David's videos. I mean, that's how pathetic this is, you know. And you know, it's just, you know, they're just doing their thing, right? I'm just here to sell my shit. I'm not here to listen to anybody else's shit, and they pretend they are when they're really not. I mean, I have nothing against just selling your shit. Just don't pretend you're trying to do something else. Fuck. I mean, I'm clearly open about what my intention is to be challenged, is to have my theory challenged. And for me to prove how it's unchallengeable, that you can't defeat it. It works.
He is the promoter of Weber's electrodynamics.
Well, I say we try now, because we have now the internet, so we can go look for these things instantaneously. And so all you need to do is provide me the name of the book. Now I have the search library for the University of Washington at my fingerprint.
Okay, so Franklin's, you know, he's being a little bit, you know, gaslighting or whatever. He's setting this guy up for failure. You know, I'm at the church site, so go ahead. Hit me. What's the magic book that we can't all read? And here we get the silly answer.
Fingertips. I also have Amazon, who has 694 titles with Henri Poincaré, which they seem to have published, like, they just like publish all his old papers willy-nilly and make them available. I'm just curious.
Do a Google on proofs of meta theory theorems.
Proof of meta theory theorems. So again, he doesn't have the title. He doesn't have something, you know, and obviously he can't. So Franklin does the search and he can't even find any reference to meta theory and Poincaré's name. Yet this guy somehow knows that this magical book exists and that it has this magical proof in it. How does he know this stuff if you can't even find it on Google?
Proofs of meta theory. Okay, now that's what because I've already performed a search on Amazon for Henri Poincaré for meta theory in the title, and I don't believe I find any. So let me just share that.
Bill,
Why don't we just do the easier argument and just say, now, all of our personal experience, I've never in my life experienced a librarian, especially the science library, and yes, my experience is pretty dated, who would even find it tolerable that they would tell them they couldn't.
Yeah, it does seem an extraordinarily bizarre claim. I mean, I didn't, you know, as I pointed out, I didn't know a couple of people that were librarians. I mean, one more than the other, but I'm just saying that, you know, I've had interactions and sort of outside of a business context. Yeah.
Buy a book that somebody requested, a science book.
Listen,
I've
that's
never
that
even
argument.
heard of such kind of censorship. Science.
That argument is not.
I've
no,
never
that argument-
even heard of it existing. So why don't we get the testimony of these people that are government officials
Hold on. Okay, we
are
got it. We
covering
got it.
up facts?
So yeah, so again, it is an insane assertion that there are public librarians who haven't told us that they have a special vault in the back of special knowledge that none of us are allowed to read. And that's in a science library. I mean, it's a preposterous assertion.
Why don't we get these librarians to testify in a court that they are censoring science? Because I don't think you could prove the case.
Okay.
Well, I mean, that's what's interesting about this, because if you could actually show that to be true, because, you know, I agree with you, that would be a remarkable thing that any librarian would agree to anything where they keep away some magical locked books. That would just seem to be against
I
every
have a comment
principle.
on all of that, folks.
I have a comment on it. So David D. Hilster knows somehow that this is a viable, you know, conspiracy theory where hundreds of thousands of science librarians, or serious librarians, let's just say librarians, are in a cabal with the government. They're just being servants to their paycheck, and they're totally comfortable with this idea. They'll even tell the customers, yes, we have the book, it's just in the secret vault and you can't read it. They'll even tell people that. They'll even say that to the person asking for the book, that's even fucking happened on planet Earth, where the librarian actually said that to the person. So their conspiracy is so incompetent that they're not only securing knowledge from our view, but they're telling us right in the open that that's what they're doing. And all we have to do is to ask. I can just walk into any library and just ask them, do you have a bunch of books in a secret vault that I can't read? And they'll say yes. You know, bullshit.
If you go to any job on the planet, and I'm not talking about librarians.
So it's any job on the planet. We're all corrupt. And if somebody pays us enough money, we'll, you know, kill other people's children for our paycheck. We'll do anything. We'll commit any kind of trespass. We'll lie to the customers and we'll steal their money and we'll do anything. We're all have no character. We all have no integrity. We all have no love for our civilization. We all don't give a fucking shit about the truth. We're all assholes like you. No, I'm not an asshole. You can't make me do that shit. Fuck. I mean, it's just amazing. No, I go to the Inquirer. I go to the press and say, they're threatening to kill me because I was going to let that book out of the vault. I was going to violate the sacred book hiding law. What a crock of shit.
And any of them.
And he won't even do, you know, he can't even recognize. So this is, you know, this guy is the editor for the CMPS. I mean, he's the editor deciding what is legitimate publishable crap. And he actually thinks this is a publishable lie, that crap like this should be published and we should make arguments this bad, and call ourselves pseudoscience, call ourselves dissident science. Bullshit. It's bullshit science. If you're going to have this little discretion and this little capacity to reason, forget it. You're you know, yeah, I wouldn't be a member of that group.
Any of them, physicists. My job, I work in supercomputers. If my job depends on something my boss told me to do or not do, I will do it. Now, this is
so he's saying he'll do it for his paycheck. He will lie to people. He will deny them access to information. He'll cover things up. I mean, what for a paycheck? I wouldn't. I mean, every job I had, I didn't lie to the customers. I mean, you know, even when I went to restaurants, they didn't, you know, I was a kind of a valuable employee, so they let me get away with it. But, you know, I was, you know, customers would like me for this very reason, because, you know, they would order like fish and I'd say, you know, it's 6 days old. Yeah, it's probably not the best choice. Yeah, I would, you know, because it's right.
isn't some grand conspiracy. It's not even so that the person's thinking, well, you know, this is immoral. I'll lose my job. I'll go ahead and say that. So I think I
How
know.
many librarians have you known? Okay, because I have known a couple of librarians, and I would speculate that a librarian at a scientific library, a librarian at a scientific library, these are dedicated people. They love this subject matter, and I don't buy it for.
So he laughs at the idea that there are people who are dedicated to an interest in science and understanding and human progress and human civilization, and they care about this stuff deeply. They're interested in this subject. He doesn't think those people exist. He mocks it and laughs at it. And yet we're supposed to think this guy is he's gonna lead us to the promised land. No, he's a used car salesman defending used car salesmen. I mean, sorry, but that's all this looks like. This is an insane rationalization for poor behavior, for making preposterous accusations for which you don't have evidence. And this guy's justifying it and defending it by impugning the character of everyone. I mean, amazing. Nobody is above your corrupt standards. Well, I think there are people above your corrupt standards. There are people who won't sell the lemon used car. They'll say, I don't want that job. I'll go wash pots and pans before I start selling people stuff that I know is a piece of shit, or before I start being a fucking liar for money.
For a minute.
That's okay.
You could remain silent if they were told to cover up the truth. There's not even librarians who are comfortable school librarians.
Okay, when you go into a job as a librarian, no, come on. I guess you didn't hear. I guess my question to you is, wait.
You have no evidence. You're just making bold assertions with no evidence.
No, here's the question I have for you, sir. Did you listen to anything I said before you opened your mouth now?
I mean, a preposterous counter argument, correct? I mean, my assertion is you have no evidence and you're making this insane accusation that everybody is a thief and a crook. I mean, fuck you.
I listened to it and I wouldn't agree with any of it. I quit.
Are you saying that you don't agree with the idea that human beings, when it comes to their jobs,
sorry,
they are told to do or do or nothing?
It doesn't work that way. Librarians are not capitalists.
So again, he thinks that librarians, again, who goes into being a librarian? I mean, who does that but somebody who loves history, loves books, loves the narratives, loves literature? Who besides somebody really interested in the subject matter? This isn't a job you just don't get there without schooling specifically for it. And there's absolutely nothing in the evidence that indicates this is the job that'll make you rich. This is the job that'll, no evidence at all. It's obviously evidence of people who are dedicated to something, not people who are undedicated and just looking for a paycheck. These are people obviously looking for more than a paycheck.
They're not looking to make 200 grand a year. It's a preposterous exaggeration of a circumstance.
We heard you, sir. We heard you.
We heard you, and you're not answering the point. It's an insane claim, and you provide zero evidence besides some tangential statement that everybody is corruptible and everybody has for an extra $10 a week they'll hide books in the secret vault, but they'll tell the customer right to their face, we're hiding them in the secret vault.
Evidence, bold assertion, weak evidence.
Franklin, I'll come in and take.
Yeah, Franklin, take control, because he's claiming that we don't have evidence, and clearly my story was complete evidence, wasn't it? Wasn't that complete enough evidence that everybody is a thief, and obviously they're all liars, and so of course they're all doing what the government told them to lie. I lie all the time because the government tells me to lie. Fucking A. Anyway, probably enough for now. Ugh. I mean, it was a funny conversation. Did get better, it got less hostile later on, but you know, clearly we have very different standards of what scientists should, what people who are going to have arguments should be behaving, how they should be behaving, and what they should be saying. Stable, genius, progressive. I'm sure none of those words really, really do apply. But anyway, Emendum girlfriend was librarian. What else could this mean? Well, yeah, it wasn't technically a girlfriend, but it was a girl friend. I didn't sleep with her. You know, it was somebody I might have been, but yes, I was too depressing, so she didn't want any. You know, she chose not to engage me further in a more fun manner, something like that. How can we see these debates you take part in? The video link is right there in the description of this video. So if you just go to the description, it's the first link on top of the list. They have them. They're supposed to be every Saturday, but they've only been like once a month lately. And we actually discussed that and towards the end of the video. And I pointed out how I don't mind doing the show on the weeks the other guy can't make it, and blah, blah, blah. But I don't think anything will come of that. But yeah, they really ought to have a system where this is more reliable. It's frankly not a very good time for me, 10 o'clock on Saturdays, but whatever. Saturday mornings. Physics in the morning is let's see. So anyway, so yeah, so go watch the rest of it if you want to hear the rest of it. But yes, you know, I just, you know, it was kind of funny because David basically starts suggesting now that I be censored. Well, we could play that part because it's funny.
This over. Come on. We need you to do something on this. What we need to do is when people talk, here's one of the rules you need, Franklin. When someone says something and they've already said it, we don't have to hear it 100 more times.
Right. So they can just dismiss it. You can make the accusation, where's your evidence? And they can just say, fuck you. And then they're not allowed to say, oh, so that's your evidence. Fuck you. You don't have any. They're not allowed to follow up and say, well, why am I listening to this then? You're making claims, you have no evidence, and you're saying I should pay attention.
Okay? We're trying to do an argument here. I've heard draft science, 20 times.
So just another insane exaggeration, right? 12, 20 times. What do you mean? No, maybe 3 times where I rephrased my point. That you don't have any evidence, that it's an extraordinary claim, that it doesn't meet my personal experience at all, that I wouldn't, for a paycheck, lie to people. What's so complicated? I mean, how is that repeating the same argument when you say it again another way and kind of emphasize that doesn't have anything to do with my personal experience? And I never even said it, but I could have said, I find it personally offensive that you would claim, that you would believe that I would do this, because I wouldn't do this. I wouldn't work at a library and say, you can't know what we know. We have the secret book. You can't see the secret book.
Say he doesn't believe that a librarian. I made a point here. The problem is we can't get in the shouting match. You have to somewhat control this. Otherwise,
right, you have to shut other people up because I get to say what I gotta say, which is I've proven that everybody's corrupt and everybody's a sellout, and especially librarians, because we know they don't go to special school and they go through all this training to know all of this Dewey system and to do all this organization and be precise and do careful and paperwork and all that shit. And no, I mean, we know they went to school to be liars. They love lying.
People are not going to, show up here. So I appreciate it, Franklin, but you got to watch.
So again, people aren't going to show up here if we don't just shut everybody up who disagrees with our shit. So again, he's just selling his shit. Anybody else's shit is shit. It's just, these people are just such hypocrites.
On those things.
Yeah, Franklin, censor me. Put me in the back room so nobody can read me.
Well, I mean,
yeah, that's a good joke.
It's not censoring.
Irony much.
It's called being, it's a quorum. I have a,
It's a quorum. It's a quorum. You know, doesn't that solve it? I'll just say it's a quorum, which means I talk, you shut up. Oh, amazing. Nobody's allowed to disagree with me. Quorum.
master's linguistics. There's a thing called rules of,
Again, so the appeal from authority. I'm a master's in linguistics. That means I know what the word quorum means, which doesn't have anything to do with what's going on here. Quorums are where you poll, you know, and meet, and you know, doesn't have anything to do with debating.
discourse and rules of when you do
Rules of discourse. Don't disagree with me. Don't make an argument better than my argument. Yeah. Don't prove me an idiot. Oh, okay.
arguments. There's no reason for you to complete. What you do is you repeat and you repeat.
Again, there was no repeating and repeating beyond just pointing out you haven't answered my question. How is this credible? I'm supposed to believe every librarian is a liar, and they're covering up the secret Poincaré book, right? An obscure scientist, not exactly a household name, and they're all hiding his metaphysics book of the magical proof that proves no other theory but his theory could be right or something. I mean, it's just such a pile of shit.
And you repeat the same thing. We have other people here with other questions. We heard you. We believe.
Yeah, and nobody else can talk because you're just going to do this. You're just going to do this. Let's change the subject to how we can't talk about anything but what I want to talk about. But I'm not going to say that's the subject, but that's really the subject.
Say you didn't believe it. That's enough. And well, the problem is, if I ask you, did you hear me? You can say, yes, I did. I still.
That's what I did say. I did say, yes, I heard you, and I didn't believe a word of it. I don't agree with a word of it. That's exactly what I said. Yes, I heard you, and I don't agree that every librarian is out for the money and they're hiding books, and they're doing it compliantly with pleasure. Bullshit.
I don't believe you. That's the answer. Not a shouting.
I didn't shout, retard. I simply pointed out how it's an impossibly silly proposition.
I don't believe
Yeah,
you.
I mean,
it's not evidence that every librarian is willing to commit perjury to their petitioners, that they're willing to cheat.
They don't want to lose their jobs.
I mean, that is an important point here. I mean, that is an extraordinary claim that they'll.
So Franklin again comes to the rescue with a little bit of reason and says, look, okay, whatever, I have to agree. This is a crazy accusation that, you know, to have no evidence but your storytelling doesn't, you know, you can't do this anecdotal, I think everybody's a liar thing. That doesn't prove that all the librarians are liars. You're just saying it. I think all the librarians are liars. Perfectly willing to lie for a couple of bucks. Pay them a couple of bucks and they'll lie. I mean, just too stupid. Okay, let's see. Hey, I don't know what that means, Earl. What was he lying about? LOL. What was he lying about? The guy asserted that every library in the world, he actually made it world. The French are also doing it, and South America is also doing it. They're all hiding a book by Henri Poincaré, okay, who was a mathematician 100 years ago. And they're all hiding his magic proof book, where he proves that no other theory could be right except this one theory, because the other theories aren't allowed to use the speed of force. They're not allowed to use c squared in their equations, or they have fundamentally, they can't be correct. Some idiotic nonsense. LOL. So again, I don't know what your comment means. What is he lying about? I mean, you haven't watched this video or that video, so LOL. I don't know what the LOL is doing, but okay. What are you laughing at? You're laughing at the concept that every librarian is a liar. And they have a secret vault full of unreadable books, that we can't read the obscure. We can read Hitler's Mein Kampf, but we can't read Henri Poincaré's Secret Science. Woo! Yeah. Anyway, so rather dismal this room was. Very few little participation. You know, these live rooms, I guess, are just not worth the trouble. And it seems disappointing, but that's the only rational conclusion. And I suppose I'll probably still do a few here and there, but yeah, I don't know. People are just too stupid, so I guess I'm gonna have to. I don't know what to do. You can't get anybody to answer questions. Can't get anybody to play a fair game, and that just plain sucks. But anyway, until next time, such and so forth and whatnot.